It came on a Thursday morning. The envelope was thick and bone white, the kind you feel hesitant to open because it already smells of decision. My name, Margaret Langford, was written in elegant copperplate across the front. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. Daniel's. A clean slant, confident, like the boy who once handed me homemade birthday cards, written in crayon and glitter glue. My son, my only child. My heart paused as I slit the envelope open with the silver letter opener my husband once used for business correspondence. Inside was a cream card pressed with gold foil. You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Daniel Langford and Sabrina Elaine Matthews. The rest was all detail. A weekend event. Vineyard Estate. Semi-formal attire. RSVP by the 10th. I set the card down and sat very still. For a long time, I stared at the window, watching morning light stretch across the kitchen table like an old friend unsure of its welcome. I had known it was coming. Daniel had mentioned Sabrina months ago, in the casual tone men use when they're hiding something precious or dangerous. She's in events, really driven. You two will meet soon. That soon never came. Not until now, in the form of an invitation I had to receive in writing. No phone call, no lunch, no introductions. I stood up, fetched the teapot, and went through the motions of steeping Earl Grey like muscle memory. The scent of bergamot filled the air, soft and citrusy, but something in me stayed unsettled. I pressed my palm flat to the table. It felt cold, a familiar cold, the kind that comes just before you realize you're no longer being included, only notified. Still, I would go. Of course I would go. I was his mother. That role doesn't end with a card. It clings to your bones like mist, gentle but inescapable. And if this Sabrina was to be my daughter-in-law, then I needed to see her with my own eyes. Not for judgment, for understanding. I had learned that sometimes love wears a smile, and sometimes it wears a mask. But you can always tell, if you know where to look. The estate was lovely, in a curated kind of way. Too lovely. Almost. Every lavender sprig had been planted for someone else's Instagram photo, and the hedges were trimmed so cleanly they might as well have been printed. I arrived just before sunset, as the sky burned honey gold, and a valet took my overnight bag with a smile too polished to be real. Inside, the hallway smelled like white roses and something more, clinical floor polish maybe. Or ambition. Sabrina met me at the entrance to the sunroom, dressed in a cream silk jumpsuit that fit too perfectly for it to be casual. Her hair was in a tight glossy bun that made her look like a magazine ad for perfection. Her arms extended toward me, practiced but warm. "Margaret, I've heard so much about you." I smiled, returned the hug lightly. Her cheek was cool against mine, perfumed with something musky and high-end. I stepped back to look at her. Bright red lipstick, flawless skin. But her eyes gray, wide, carefully painted, never stayed with mine longer than a blink. I noticed it immediately, a glance, then away. Another glance, then to the floor, the glass, the staff behind me. "Daniel's told me what a strong woman you are," she said, the compliment dropping like a silk napkin. "You raised him on your own after everything." She let the sentence trail off with just enough sympathy to make me wonder if she'd rehearsed it. I nodded, offering my most grandmotherly smile, the kind that says, "I know what you're doing, but go on, darling." She gestured for champagne. I declined, preferring tea. Her lips pressed together for a split second too long, then curved upward again. We sat in white chairs overlooking a courtyard of flickering lanterns. She spoke about Daniel's career, their wedding planner, the guest list, her parents. I listened, smiled, nodded. Said how lovely a dozen different ways. But all the while I watched her hands flutter, her gaze dart, her spine stay just a little too straight. I'd met women like Sabrina before. Beautiful, polished, kind on paper. The kind who ask about your health but not your history. The kind who think being polite is the same as being good. She was hiding something. I didn't know what yet. But I would find it. The kitchen was quiet except for the occasional clink of china and the low hum of the espresso machine. I had woken early, out of habit more than need, and wandered downstairs for a glass of water. The staff had just begun prepping for the brunch, their voices hushed and courteous. I moved silently, barefoot on the cool tiles, and stood by the pantry door that led to the smaller service corridor. It was there I heard them. Laughter. High, sharp. The kind women share when they believe the walls are thick enough to protect them. "She's already up," one voice said, light and mocking. "Of course she is. These old ladies don't sleep. They just wait." A burst of giggles followed. "She looks like she stepped out of a Jane Austen novel," another added. "That blouse, that brooch. Very regal martyr energy." I stood perfectly still, the condensation on my glass slipping between my fingers. "She's sweet, though," a third voice said, but not kindly. "Like one of those harmless church ladies. I almost want to pat her head. Yeah, well, the clock's ticking. She'll be on her way soon enough. Just like the last one." The room went quiet after that. One of them must have noticed the silence beyond the doorway. I stepped back, careful not to make a sound. My heart wasn't racing. Not angry. Not yet. Just steady. A slow kind of awareness. The kind that settles into your bones when you realize you're not just being tolerated, you're being erased. I turned away and returned to my room, glass in hand, as if nothing had happened. I sat by the window and watched the morning stretch across the vineyard. Birds fluttered across the rows of vines, unaware of the little storms that gathered indoors. I had been underestimated before, by men who smiled too wide, by clients who thought age meant softness. And now, by Sabrina's little court of ivory-toothed bridesmaids. They thought they were clever, whispering like children in corners. They didn't realize I had stopped reacting to cruelty years ago. I simply recorded it. The clock may be ticking, but not mine. It was after lunch, when the sun hung low and lazy against the estate windows, that I brought out the box. Small, velvet-lined, wrapped in tissue I'd saved for nearly 2 decades. The Langford ring. It had belonged to Daniel's grandmother, passed down to me by my late husband with the kind of reverence some reserve for sacred texts. A marquise-cut sapphire, deep and dark as a midnight sky, flanked by 2 old-cut diamonds. Not flashy, not modern, but timeless. Sabrina was alone in the lounge, sipping iced tea with one perfectly manicured hand scrolling through what looked like a floral arrangement on her iPad. I approached with a soft smile, the box tucked between both hands, like a gift that hummed with meaning. "I thought you might want to see this," I said. "It's a family tradition." She looked up, blinking once before setting the tablet aside. "Oh?" I opened the box slowly, letting her see the ring in the light. The sapphire caught the sun, glowing with a blue so deep it looked nearly black. Her lips parted slightly just for a second, but then came together in a polite smile. "It's beautiful," she said. "Daniel's grandmother wore it for nearly 50 years. Then I wore it for 32. It's seen a lot of life and love." She nodded, her eyes on the ring but not reaching for it. "It's lovely, Margaret. Really. But I actually have a ring already. Custom designed. Daniel and I chose it together months ago." I tilted my head slightly. "Of course. I understand." She smiled, a little too quickly. "It's more modern. Something that suits us." I closed the box gently, smoothing the tissue paper before folding it back over. "Naturally." There was a pause between us, thin and stretched. Then she returned to her screen as if the moment had never happened. I sat for another breath, pretending to admire the light, before standing. "Some things don't mind being passed over," I said casually. "But they never forget being rejected." I left the lounge quietly, the ring still in my hands. No tears, no offense, just a deeper silence, settling in. That was the first time I saw it for what it was: not preference, not style, fear. She didn't want anything that tied her to us, to history, to blood. She only wanted what she could control. They arrived just before the cocktail hour, in a sleek Blacktown car that didn't match the vineyard's rustic charm. Everything about them was deliberate. Sabrina's mother stepped out first, tall, silver blonde, immaculately tailored in pale pink silk that made no sound when she walked. Her heels didn't touch gravel, they hovered. Her smile was thin, lacquered, and left no imprint behind. Her father emerged next, Square shoulders, thick gold cufflinks, and a laugh that felt too loud for the quiet breeze of the estate. He gripped Daniel's hand like it was a business deal, not a welcome. His watch gleamed in the sun, and his eyes scanned me briefly politely, but I could feel the measurement behind it. "You must be Margaret," her mother said. "We've heard so much about you." I nodded. "Only the good parts, I hope." Her smile didn't change. "Of course." We stood in the sun-dappled entryway, Sabrina watching closely. She didn't move to stand beside me or them. She stayed between us, perfectly centered, perfectly neutral, like a diplomat hosting a fragile peace summit. Over drinks, I listened. Not to the words they were about guest lists, floral budgets, the wine pairing at the reception, but to the spaces in between. Her father kept mentioning strategic partnerships and future leverage. Her mother kept glancing toward the photographers, straightening Sabrina's hair like she was prepping her for a brand launch, not a marriage. No one asked how Daniel and Sabrina met. No one told stories from childhood. It was all logistics and lineage and the assurance of appearances. A merger, not a memory. Sabrina watched it unfold with serene detachment. Daniel tried to smile through it all, nodding too often, eyes flickering toward me whenever the conversation grew too sharp. I offered him a soft look, a small reassurance. When her father raised his glass to toast a strong union, built on trust and value, I finally spoke. "I suppose love is a kind of currency too," I said, sipping my water. Silence, brief and brittle. Then Sabrina's mother smiled wider, but her eyes didn't move. "Only when it appreciates," she said. Dinner was held under the pergola just as the sun dipped low enough to kiss the treetops. The tables were set with crystal glasses and linens so white they glowed. Laughter floated above the soft clatter of silverware. And Sabrina, of course, sat at the head of the table beside Daniel, smiling with the precision of someone who knew where every camera lens was pointed. I had chosen a blouse my husband once adored, cream with delicate embroidery at the collar. Modest, soft, old-fashioned maybe, but it made me feel like myself, like Margaret. The server refilled my glass with sparkling water, and I reached for the breadbasket when it happened. A splash. Warm. Thick. A gasp somewhere nearby. Red. A deep, arterial splash of Cabernet soaked down the front of my blouse like a wound. The table hushed. "Oh no," Sabrina said flatly, holding the empty wine glass in one hand, her napkin still pristine in the other. "So clumsy of me." My hand froze over the bread. I looked down at the stain, blooming like a scar over my chest, then slowly lifted my eyes to meet hers. She didn't apologize. Not really. Her tone was feigned concern, but her mouth twitched at the corners, a smile she tried to swallow. I caught it. Daniel stood too quickly, his chair scraping loudly. "Mom, are you okay?" "Of course," I said quietly. "It's only fabric." Sabrina dabbed at the tablecloth with her napkin, not mine. "Red's a strong color," she murmured, not quite looking at me. "Some things just don't come out." I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I simply rose, steady and slow, and excused myself from the table. In the bathroom mirror, I stared at the crimson stain spreading like a target over my chest. I ran cold water over the silk, but it only darkened, never disappeared. I dried my hands and straightened my shoulders. Accidents speak in silence, but so do intentions. When I returned, Daniel looked apologetic. Sabrina had already moved on, telling a story about imported orchids. I took my seat again, wearing my ruined blouse-like armor. Some people think cruelty has to be loud. They've never met someone like her. I found Daniel alone the next morning near the fountain, pretending to scroll through his phone while the estate slowly stirred to life. The breakfast buffet was already being laid out in the garden, but he hadn't touched a plate. He looked thinner than I remembered, shoulders a little more sloped, eyes a little dimmer. He used to greet the day with energy, always reaching for the sun like a child with a kite. Now he sat in the shade. "Sleep well?" I asked, seating myself beside him on the stone bench. He nodded without looking up. "Yeah, just restless." His fingers tapped nervously against the screen, although it was dark. No messages, just movement to fill the silence. I let it hang there. Then gently, like brushing dust from a frame, I reached for his arm. He flinched. It was quick, barely noticeable. But a mother notices. My eyes drifted to his wrist. The edge of his cuff had ridden up. Just enough. There, near the bone, 2 dark marks. Not fresh. Yellowing. Deep enough to have taken effort. "Daniel," I said quietly. He pulled the sleeve down quickly. "It's nothing." I waited. "From the gym," he added, eyes still on the screen. "Wrist curls. I've been trying to lift heavier." He gave a weak smile. "The kind boys give when they're caught and don't want to disappoint you." "Funny," I said softly. "You hated wrist curls. Always said they were useless." He said nothing. The fountain bubbled beside us, oblivious. I looked at him then, not just at the bruises, but at the curve of his shoulders, the tired sag beneath his eyes, the way his jaw tensed when a staff member walked past. "Are you happy, Daniel?" He looked up sharply. "Of course I am. What kind of question is that?" "The kind a mother asks when her son lies with his eyes and not his mouth." He stood then, brushing invisible dust from his shirt. "Don't do this, Mom. Please. Not now." And he left. But he'd already answered me. The east wing of the estate was quieter than the rest. Less decorative, more functional. A corridor of guest rooms for overflow visitors, bridesmaids, cousins, vendors staying the night. I'd gotten turned around after breakfast and wandered there with a cup of lukewarm tea in my hand and curiosity riding shotgun. Most of the doors were open, revealing neatly made beds and untouched fruit baskets. But one stood out. Room 6. Locked. Not just closed, locked. I jiggled the handle gently, then knocked once. No response. Strange. I turned to leave when I heard footsteps light, fast. One of the younger staff members, a boy not much older than 19, appeared at the end of the hallway. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked too quickly. "Just wandering," I said lightly. Didn't realize this part was off limits. He hesitated. "It's not, really. But room 6 has been, reserved for storage. Cleaning supplies and things." I smiled. "Seems like a lot of security for bleach and mops." He laughed nervously. "The owner keeps valuables, wine inventory, stuff like that." Another staff member passed by then, a woman in her 40s with hard eyes and a clipboard. She shot him a look that folded him in half. "Don't linger, ma'am," she said to me. "This wing isn't ready for guests." I raised an eyebrow. "So it is for guests?" She didn't answer, just walked away, heels echoing too sharply for such soft carpet. Later that afternoon, I passed by the same hallway. Someone had taped a piece of paper over the door. "Staff use only. Maintenance." In fresh ink? I don't know what was behind that door, but I know the sound of a room trying too hard to disappear. And I've learned that some doors, once opened, don't close again. She was the first person I'd met when I arrived. A young woman, no more than 20, with a soft face and a nervous smile. She helped carry my bag up the narrow back staircase because the elevator was being repaired. She introduced herself as Nina, though I'm not sure she meant to. It slipped out between apologies and small talk. She reminded me of the girls I used to teach Ernest, eager to please, afraid of being noticed too much or not enough. That evening, after the wine incident, I had returned to my room to find a fresh white blouse folded on the bed. The tag was still attached. No note, no knock. Just the blouse and a small lavender sachet resting on the pillow. I asked the concierge at the front desk the next morning if I could thank her. "Nina?" I said. He blinked. "We don't have a Nina on staff. She's young, dark hair, tied back. She helped me with my luggage." He flipped through a clipboard of names. "You must be thinking of Lorna, maybe, or Angie?" "No," she said Nina. He shook his head slowly. "There's no Nina here, ma'am." I asked another maid near the garden staircase. "I don't know that name," she said, glancing quickly over her shoulder. "Sorry." Something in the way she walked off told me not to ask again. By noon, I wasn't sure if I had imagined her. There were too many faces in uniforms, too many nameless smiles, too many rules about where I should and shouldn't be. But I remembered her hands. They had trembled slightly as she poured my water. I remembered the way her voice caught when I complimented her necklace. I remembered her eyes darting to the hallway before she said goodbye. People like Nina don't vanish unless someone wants them to. And when people vanish in places this expensive, it's never by accident. The rehearsal dinner was held in the grand ballroom, a room too polished to feel warm. White hydrangeas spilled from silver vases. The lighting was low and golden. Laughter floated like perfume, but none of it felt real. I wore navy. Understated. I took my seat near the front, beside Sabrina's mother, who offered a tight smile and said, "Margaret, how lovely that you made it." As if I had a choice. The meal passed in a blur of courses I didn't taste. Daniel made a brief toast, nervous, eyes down. Sabrina beamed beside him, radiant and icy, not a hair out of place, not a moment unscripted. She made her rounds like a queen at court, resting her hand lightly on shoulders, posing for photos, saying all the right things with a smile that never touched her eyes. Eventually, she came to me. I rose, because I was raised that way. She leaned in to kiss my cheek, cool skin, perfect perfume, and whispered low enough for only me to hear, "Just stay pretty and quiet and we'll all get what we want." Her voice was smooth, almost kind, but I felt it like a slap. I pulled back slowly. Our eyes met for the first time that night. Hers didn't blink. "What is it you want, Sabrina?" I asked softly. She smiled. Not with her mouth stayed still, but her eyes narrowed with something that almost looked like pity. "To belong," she said. "Isn't that what we all want?" She turned and drifted toward the next table, where photographers were waiting and champagne was being poured. I sat back down and folded my napkin in my lap. Pretty. Quiet. I had played that part before. In boardrooms, in funerals, in hospital waiting rooms where the silence roared louder than grief. But not anymore. Not this time. She wanted me to sit still and watch. She picked the wrong audience. I offered to help with the photographer because no one else had. He was a sweet man, late 20s, thin as a wire, always adjusting his lenses like he couldn't quite see the world until it was framed just right. He seemed grateful to have an extra pair of hands. We walked the vineyard paths before sunset, scouting locations for portraits. I held diffusers and steadied tripods while he tested angles. It gave me something to do with my hands. Something useful. Something quiet. "This spot," he said, stopping near the south garden. "She'll want something dramatic here, especially in that dress." She, of course, was Sabrina. He pulled up a sample on his tablet. "We did a test shoot yesterday," he said casually. "She wanted editorial options." He handed me the screen. The image was beautifully lit. Sabrina, backlit by golden light, chin tilted. But it wasn't the pose that caught me. It was the man beside her. Not Daniel. He was taller, broader in the shoulders, darker hair, no tie. His hand was around her waist, not resting, not polite, gripping. His head bent toward hers. Her hand curved around his wrist like it belonged there. I blinked. "Is that—" I hesitated. The photographer looked. "Oh, no, that wasn't Daniel. That was her stylist's assistant, or, wait, no, maybe her cousin?" She said they were close. He tapped past the image too quickly. "They were just messing around," he added, laughing nervously. "You know how these creative types are, very expressive." I nodded and handed the tablet back, my hand colder than it had been a moment ago. Expressive. A word used to explain what can't be explained, or what no one wants to acknowledge. Later that evening, I couldn't stop thinking about the photo. The way her body leaned into his. The quiet certainty in it. If that was her cousin, I was the Queen of England. It was the little things. Always. A glimpse of her keying something into Daniel's closet safe. A quick turn of her body when I entered the room, as if she had just shut the door on something private. I didn't say anything at first, just observed. The safe wasn't hidden. It was built into the wall behind a row of hanging shirts, subtle but visible. Daniel had installed it 2 years ago, after a break-in at a friend's apartment. "Just in case," he'd said. I had asked him once, half joking, what he kept inside. He smiled. "Old tax records, my passport, a few letters." Then he added, "You know the code, right? Dad's birthday." I nodded. Of course I knew. June 3rd, 1959. Unforgettable. Sabrina, however, hadn't been around when that code was chosen. And yet there she was, 3 days before the ceremony. alone in Daniel's room, standing at the safe. The beeps of the keypad were faint, but unmistakable. I stepped into the doorway. She jumped. "Oh, Margaret, I was just looking for the cufflinks. Daniel said they were here." She gestured vaguely to the shelves, her tone light. Her hand casually rested on the safe door. "Strange," I said. "He usually keeps those in the dresser." She smiled. "Maybe he moved them." I didn't respond, just let my gaze linger a beat too long. That night, while Daniel poured us both a glass of wine on the back patio, I asked him, "Do you share your safe code with Sabrina?" He blinked. "No, why would I?" "Just wondering," I said, swirling the wine. He sipped, unbothered. "I mean, it's not like there's anything secret in there, but it's still yours." He nodded. "Of course." I watched the way he spoke, calm, trusting, unaware. The wine was good, a little dry. I held it in my mouth for a moment before swallowing. Tomorrow, I would check the safe myself. I already had the code, and now I had a reason. It began with the photograph. Then the bruises, the safe, the wine, the whispers, and a girl who no longer existed. One incident could be explained away. Two could be coincidence. But after the third, the fourth, the fifth, something inside me clicked back into place. Not suspicion. Something older. Something firmer. A kind of knowing women carry in their bones when they've seen enough to understand silence as language. So I began to write. Not pages of emotion. No theatrics. Just the facts. I used the back pages of an old ledger I kept in my overnight bag, a relic from the days when I managed client invoices by hand. Its lines were steady, familiar, a place for truth. June 15, 10:43 a.m. Overheard bridesmaids near pantry. Clock ticking. Just like the last one. 3:20 p.m. Room 6 locked. Paper sign added. Staff only maintenance. Previously unmarked. June 16, 9:12 a.m. Saw Sabrina input code into Daniel's safe. Daniel confirmed later. Never gave her code. 1:04 p.m. Found wine-soaked blouse, replaced with exact size. No staff knew Nina. Each note was short, neutral, just observations. The ledger grew heavier by the day. I wrote in the mornings, when the house was still. I tucked it beneath my clothes in the bottom drawer. No one asked why I kept the door locked at night. This wasn't about vengeance. Not yet. It was about protection. For Daniel, who still looked at her like she was sunlight. For the name my husband left behind. For my own sanity, which deserved proof of what I already felt was true. Truth, once recorded, can't be gaslit. And soon, it would speak louder than politeness. The valet didn't question me. Perhaps I looked like I belonged, blazer pressed, hair pinned, pearls simple. Women like me don't raise alarms. We write checks. We wait in lobbies. I had followed Sabrina from the estate under the excuse of a headache and a missed dinner. No one noticed. She had taken a call near the fountain, whispered something about finally being done with it, then slipped into a car without saying goodbye. I waited 2 minutes, then followed. The hotel was sleek and discreet. Not the kind you book for a bachelorette weekend. The kind where the staff knows not to ask for last names. She walked through the glass doors like she'd been there before. I waited across the street in my car, angled just enough to see the lobby through the leaves. 12 minutes later, he arrived. The man from the photo, taller than Daniel, looser in posture, confident in the way that comes from being chosen without having to ask. He wasn't nervous, he wasn't hiding. He smiled at her, and she touched his arm, the way I've only ever seen done in private. Familiar, intimate. They didn't linger. No front desk check-in, no hesitation. Straight to the elevator. I sat very still, not shocked, just confirmed. She had smiled at Daniel that morning, accepted his kiss, adjusted his tie, and by nightfall, she was in another man's arms with the same practiced grace. I wrote the time down in my journal. June 17, 9:51 p.m., Hotel Anselm. Sabrina, unidentified man, entered together, no hesitation. Same man as photo and vineyard. When they didn't come down after an hour, I left. The ledger waited on my nightstand. I slipped the note inside like another thread being pulled from a carefully spun web. She thought she was writing a story with no witnesses. She didn't know I was watching. Not curious anymore, just prepared. It was late afternoon when I found it. The air in Daniel's study was still, thick with the scent of paper and cologne, the kind that never fully fades no matter how many windows you open. Sabrina had been there earlier. I knew it from the faint trace of her perfume, that sweet amber note that lingered on polished wood like a fingerprint. Daniel had asked me to fetch a guest list from his desk drawer while he was on a call. A simple errand. Harmless. The list wasn't there, but something else was. An envelope marked Private Financial Records. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. Inside, a stack of neatly stapled papers. A copy of Daniel's insurance policy, his investment forms, and a document I hadn't seen before, a power of attorney draft dated 2 weeks ago. I read the heading once, then twice. Designation of financial proxy, Sabrina Elaine Matthews. My breath caught. Daniel's signature sat at the bottom in clean, black ink. Too clean, too perfect. The pen pressure didn't match his usual hand. His real one dipped slightly on the tail of the L in Langford. This one didn't. It was flawless. Too flawless. I held the page to the light. The signature line shimmered slightly, as though the ink had been printed, not written. And then I noticed something else. A witness signature. F. Harris. There was no one by that name on the staff list. I sat there for a long time, the paper trembling just slightly between my fingers. The implication was clear. If anything happened to Daniel, anything at all, Sabrina controlled everything. His accounts, his estate, the house my husband and I once owned. When Daniel came back into the room, I had already tucked the papers neatly back into the envelope. "Find the list?" he asked. "Not yet," I said, smiling. He kissed my forehead and left again. I waited until the door clicked shut before whispering to the empty room. "She's already written your ending, my darling. You just haven't read it yet." The housekeeper found me in the corridor that night, her face pale beneath the soft lamplight. Her name was Mrs. Adair, an older woman, loyal, quiet, the kind who could make herself invisible until she didn't want to be. "Ma'am," she said in a low voice, glancing behind her, "may I speak with you a moment?" We stepped into the linen room, a narrow space lined with folded towels and faint lavender. She closed the door and pressed her back against it like someone bracing for an earthquake. "I've seen the way you look," she said softly. "You notice things, I can tell." I didn't answer, I just waited. Her hands twisted in her apron. "You need to be careful, Mrs. Langford." "Of what?" "Of her." Her eyes darted toward the hallway, as if the walls themselves might listen. "Miss Sabrina," she whispered. "She's done this before." The words hung there, cold and sharp. "Before?" I repeated. Mrs. Adair nodded, her chin trembling. "Twice. Once in New York, once in Santa Barbara. Both men wealthy. One was older, the other closer to her age. Each time, she came in sweet and soft, and each time things went wrong, very wrong." "What happened to them?" She swallowed. "The first one died. A fall down the stairs, they said. The second disappeared. Police called it voluntary. He moved abroad." Her voice broke slightly. I didn't believe it then, and I don't believe it now. I stared at her, my heart beat slow, steady, deliberate. "How do you know this?" "I worked for her family before this," she said. "Back then I thought she was just impulsive. But when I saw her name here again, and your son's—" She stopped herself. I shouldn't have said anything. She reached for the door, but I caught her wrist gently. "You did the right thing," I said. Her voice cracked. "Please, don't tell her I spoke to you. She finds out she'll make me disappear too." I nodded once. She slipped out and vanished down the corridor like smoke. When I returned to my room, I opened my journal. The entry was short. June 19, 10:14. PM housekeeper confirms pattern. 2 prior incidents. Both men wealthy. 1 dead, 1 missing. Same woman. Then, beneath it, I wrote one final line in smaller script. It's not paranoia anymore. It's history repeating itself. It was a small, amber bottle tucked behind the shaving cream and cologne. Unlabeled. No pharmacy sticker. No instructions. Just a blank white cap and a half-faded lot number printed in tiny font. I wasn't looking for it. I had gone into Daniel's bathroom to collect the laundry. His suits were damp from the steam, and I couldn't stand the idea of him showing up to his own rehearsal dinner smelling like mildew. But there it was, sitting too neatly, hidden, but not buried. I opened it. The pills were pale blue, oval, smooth, the kind that don't look dangerous until they're inside you. I slipped 2 into a tissue, folded it, and placed it in my pocket. The rest I left untouched. When I turned around, Daniel was in the doorway, towel around his shoulders. "You okay, Mum?" he asked, rubbing his hair. "I was just airing things out," I said calmly. "Your cologne is getting bold these days." He smiled faintly. But I noticed it again. His eyes didn't hold focus. Not like before. "Have you been sleeping?" I asked. He shrugged. "Kind of. Sabrina said I've been restless. And the headaches? Still there. Probably work stress. Have you seen a doctor?" He waved me off. "It's just nerves. Big weekend." He turned to hang up his towel and I saw it again, the bruise, now yellowing around the edges, just below his elbow. When he left the room, I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the pill. An hour later, in the quiet of my room, I used an online identifier. Diphenhydramine, lorazepam, clonidine. The ingredients weren't standard. The mixture wasn't over the counter. But the side effects were clear: drowsiness, confusion, memory fog, difficulty concentrating. I returned to the journal. The entries were starting to blur together. But each one told the same story. Control. Subtle. Invasive. Disguised as concern. Daniel wasn't stressed. He was being softened. Quieted. Just enough to stop asking questions. Just enough to trust her instead of himself. I made a new page, titled it Intervention Timeline, and I circled tomorrow. Sabrina loved to talk about the ring. "Custom designed," she'd say. "Platinum band, antique cut, inspired by Italian royalty, one of a kind." She flashed it at brunches, held it just so during photos, played with it whenever Daniel spoke, as though it anchored her to him. But something about it always unsettled me. It wasn't the size, it was too large, too ostentatious for Daniel's usual taste. It wasn't the design either, though it felt more catalog than couture. It was the way she protected it. Never let it out of her sight. Never took it off, even when cooking or swimming. And when she wasn't wearing it, it was always in the same place, her locked jewelry pouch, tucked into her purse, which never left her side. One afternoon, she left it on the kitchen island while taking a call outside. A rare lapse. I had 5 minutes, maybe less. I took a quick photo and returned it untouched. That evening, while everyone was at dinner, I made a call to a jeweler friend in the city, someone who owed me a favor. I sent the image. His response was fast. "That's a modified replica. We've seen a few. The original was sold at a Los Angeles pawn shop years ago, linked to a fraud case." A fraud case. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up researching. The scandal involved a ring switch. A woman with a history of charm and deceit who preyed on affluent men with shallow roots and deeper wallets. The photo used in the report was blurred, but something about the woman's eyes felt familiar, sharp, unapologetic. By morning, I had confirmed it. The ring Sabrina claimed to have designed had been mass-produced and discontinued 3 years ago following the scandal. I printed everything: photos, articles, court records. A single redacted line in a deposition. The accused used the ring to validate her emotional leverage, manipulating multiple parties during financial planning. And now that same ring sat on my son's fiancé's finger. Custom, she had called it. But nothing about her was. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Some performances deserve to reach their final act before the curtain drops. And when it did, every prop, every lie, every false gleam would be accounted for. The file came in a manila envelope, hand-delivered by a friend who owed me nothing but remembered my late husband fondly. City Hall had changed little over the decades, but certain names still meant something. Inside, 3 crisp pages. Public records, easily forgotten. unless someone cared enough to look. Marriage certificate. Los Angeles County. Sabrina Elaine Matthews. To Julian McAllister, age 39. Real estate developer. Married 18 months ago. Then, a second document. Petition for annulment filed only 7 months later. The reason listed: emotional incompatibility following a traumatic event. And then the final piece. A newspaper clipping, barely legible from the folds. Local developer hospitalized. After balcony fall. Authorities rule out foul play. My breath caught. The article included no charges, no inquiries, just a single line from a neighbor. They always seemed so in love. She was just starting her wedding planning business. Julian survived, according to the article. Broken ribs, spinal injuries. He now lived in Colorado, under full-time care. The photo accompanying the article showed a young woman clinging to his hospital bedside, grief etched across her perfect face. It was Sabrina. Same eyes. Same ring. Same story. Daniel didn't know. I would have bet my life on it. And just like that, the final brick in her story collapsed. This wasn't her first engagement. This wasn't even her first husband. This was her pattern. And Daniel was following the same path. I closed the envelope and sealed it again. It wasn't time to show him. Not yet. The performance was still unfolding. But now, I held the script. The sun was warm on the terrace as I sipped my tea, watching Sabrina direct the caterers like a woman possessed. She moved with such ease, touching plates, directing florals, correcting wine placements, all smiles and charm. But her eyes never softened. Not once. That morning, I had made my choice. I found Mrs. Adair polishing the silver near the dining hall. She startled when I touched her elbow. "Good morning," I said. She nodded nervously. "Ma'am," I smiled. "Do you remember what you told me?" She stiffened. "I shouldn't have." "No, you should have," I interrupted gently. "And now I need your help again." She looked up slowly. "What do you want me to do?" I leaned in, my voice barely more than breath. "Let's see how Sabrina handles my engagement surprise." Her brow furrowed. "Engagement?" I let the words hang for a beat. "Yes, mine." Mrs. Adair blinked. "You're engaged?" "No," I said, folding the linen napkin in my hand. "But Sabrina doesn't know that. And she spent her entire engagement convinced I'm just a sweet, fragile old woman slowly drifting into memory." I met her gaze, steady and calm. She's never seen me when I'm paying attention. The housekeeper nodded slowly, the ghost of a smile breaking across her lips. I patted her hand. "I'll need you to pass along something to the florist." Quietly. That evening, I took out my mother's old cameo brooch worn only once at my wedding. I pinned it to my dress, just above the heart. This time, I wouldn't be the one shrinking into the background. Let Sabrina direct her lighting. Let her coordinate every photo angle. But soon, there would be a new story at her engagement party. A plot twist. And I would deliver it, smiling. I've learned that rumors don't have to be loud, they just have to be believable. The morning before the engagement gala, Sabrina's parents joined me on the terrace for breakfast. They were dressed, as always, for presentation, her father in linen slacks and a watch that gleamed too loudly in the sunlight, her mother in pale lavender silk, face painted with restraint. Sabrina hadn't yet appeared. She was finalizing details. "Your son is very lucky," her mother said, stirring her tea with the kind of grace that masks contempt. "So is Sabrina," I replied, smiling. "Though I suppose luck isn't the only thing she's after." A delicate pause. "Perfect." I looked away as if I hadn't noticed. Her father chuckled. "Well, ambition doesn't hurt. We've all worked for what we have." "Oh, absolutely," I said. "Though my late husband always believed in the quieter kind of wealth. The kind you don't see." Her mother tilted her head. "Quieter?" "Yes. He kept certain things, private family trusts, land titles, investments only a few of us knew about. Even Daniel doesn't know the full story. But I suppose that's what good planning is." Her spoon froze mid-stir. I pretended not to notice. "Hidden inheritance," I said lightly, as if repeating an old family joke. That was his favorite phrase. He used to say, "Only the clever ever find it." Her father's eyes shifted, calculation flickering behind politeness. Interesting. Of course, I added, folding my napkin neatly. None of that matters to Daniel. He's always been driven by love, not money. Though I sometimes wonder if the people around him share that sentiment. The line landed like a slow ripple in calm water. Subtle, but unstoppable. When Sabrina joined us moments later, radiant, glowing, rehearsed her parents, greeted her with smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. She didn't notice, but I did. By afternoon, I caught her mother glancing at me twice during the floral rehearsal. By evening, Sabrina's father pulled Daniel aside just to chat about long-term planning. The seed had been planted, and I didn't need to water it. People like them always do that themselves. The hallway outside room 6 was empty when I passed it just before midnight. The staff had retired. Even Mrs. Adair had gone home for the evening. My heart beat quietly but with purpose. I carried a small camera, a discreet, motion-triggered one Daniel had bought years ago for security after a break-in scare. He'd never installed it. I had. I knelt by the doorframe, feeling for the gap where the molding met the wall. The tape held firm. The lens was invisible from the outside. I pressed the test button once. A soft green light blinked, then vanished. By morning, the door still bore its staff-only sign, slightly peeling at the corner. No one questioned my presence in the hallway. Why would they? I was just the mother lost, polite, aging. That night, I retrieved the camera. I watched the footage alone, curtains drawn, light dimmed. The recording began empty hours of silence, occasional shadows, nothing more. Then, just past 11:30 p.m., movement. The door opened. Sabrina entered first. Her hair loose, her expression different, harder, sharper, stripped of performance. Moments later, he followed. The man from the photograph. They spoke quietly at first, their words muffled by the room's acoustics, then clearer, closer to the lens as they moved. He's taking them regularly now, Sabrina said. Half in the morning, half at night, no suspicion. The man's voice was low, familiar. And how long before? Soon, she interrupted. He's foggy already, forgetful. Another week, maybe 2. The doctor will call it stress. Or exhaustion. And after? A pause. Then a smile I could feel through the screen. After, I'm free, and everything transfers. My throat went dry. They kissed unhurried, confident, practiced. Then she laughed softly, the kind of laugh I'd once mistaken for charm. When the video ended, I sat perfectly still. The air felt heavier than before. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I simply pressed save, labeled the file, and copied it twice, one for my purse, one for the safe in my room. The camera's light blinked once, before going dark again. They thought they had time. But time, like love, is never truly theirs to control. It happened just as planned, subtle enough to draw attention, but not suspicion. Brunch was being served under the veranda, sunlight filtering through gauzy curtains, the air thick with citrus and chatter. Sabrina sat beside Daniel, radiant as ever, adjusting place cards and pretending to laugh at something her mother had said. I waited until the first toast was raised. Then I let my hand tremble. My chair tilted just slightly on the uneven brick. The porcelain plate slipped from my lap. It was enough. The sound cracked through the air, a clean shatter of china and a gasp of silverware. I gripped my wrist, drawing in a shaky breath. I'm fine, I murmured, though my face had gone pale enough to silence the table. Sabrina was on her feet instantly, her voice pitched with concern. Oh, Margaret, are you hurt? Her performance was impeccable. I almost applauded. Daniel reached for me, but she placed a hand on his arm. I've got it, she said gently. You stay. I let her guide me to my room, one careful step at a time. The act of weakness suited me. For the first time, she saw what she wanted to see, a fragile old woman relying on her future daughter-in-law. When we reached my suite, she helped me to the chair. I winced for effect, pressing my wrist. I'll fetch you some ice, she said. No need, I said quickly, with a small smile. There's already a pack in the minibar. Would you mind grabbing my pills from the vanity while you're at it? They help with the dizziness. Her eyes flickered for a moment, then she turned toward the bathroom. I listened to the clinking of glass, the faint rustle of paper. When she wasn't looking, I reached into my handbag and withdrew a near-identical amber bottle label printed cleanly. Contents switched that morning. When she returned, I took the pills from her hand and thanked her softly. "You're such a comfort, Sabrina. I don't know what I'd do without you." Her smile tightened. "You'll feel better soon. I'm sure I will." She left the room moments later. I sat perfectly still, the bottle warm in my palm. One marked, one unmarked, and for the first time, she was the one uncertain of what she'd given. The first stone had been placed. Undoing doesn't happen in a scream. It starts with a whisper and a single, trembling hand. It was the next evening when he came to me. I found him standing by the orchard fence, his hands in his pockets, staring at nothing. The sun was low, the air humming with cicadas. "Mom," he said quietly, "can I talk to you?" I nodded. "Always." He hesitated. The words seemed to cost him something. "I don't know what's happening to me lately. I feel off, like my mind's half underwater, like I wake up and can't remember whole hours." I studied him. His skin was pale, his eyes glassy, but behind them there it was, the first flicker of clarity. "How long?" I asked. He rubbed his temples. "A few weeks, maybe more. I keep telling Sabrina I feel weird, and she says it's just stress, that I should take the pills she gave me." I stayed still. "She gives you pills?" He nodded, frowning. "She says they're herbal. For focus. And you trust her?" He looked at me then. Really looked. I did. Silence settled between us, heavy as fog. I stepped closer, placed a hand on his arm. "Listen to me, Daniel. Whatever she gives you, stop taking it. And don't drink anything she pours for you. Not coffee, not wine, not water." He blinked, startled. "Mom, just do it," I said softly. "You don't have to believe me yet. Just stop." He searched my face, confusion warring with exhaustion. "You think she's—" "I think you're in danger." His throat worked as he swallowed hard. Then, finally, he nodded. For the first time in weeks, I saw my son again. Not the hollow-eyed stranger she'd been sculpting, but Daniel. Real, breathing, aware. I squeezed his hand. "There's a reason she needs you confused," I said. "And there's a reason I don't." He exhaled shakily. "What do I do?" "Nothing," I said. "Not yet. Let her think everything's the same." End of quote. He nodded once, a flicker of resolve passing through his face. As he walked back toward the house, I watched the light shift across the vineyard, gold fading to gray. The fog had started to lift, and Sabrina, poor, clever Sabrina, was about to find herself walking straight into daylight. The footage was enough. But confirmation, that was the nail. I met him at a quiet cafe outside the city, the kind with chipped saucers and too many ivy plants. He arrived nervous, hesitant, still looking over his shoulder even though she wasn't there. His name was Louis, mid-30s, disheveled but trying not to be. He'd been handsome once, still was, if you looked past the sleepless eyes. "I'm not sure why I agreed to this," he muttered. "I think you are," I said, sliding a flash drive across the table. "And I think you already know what's on there." He stared at it for a long time. Then he sighed, shaking his head. "She told me I was paranoid, that I was sabotaging my own happiness." I nodded slowly. "Classic gaslighting." He laughed, bitter. "You're not wrong. She started with little things, canceling plans with my family, claiming they were rude to her. Then came the documents. Power of attorney. Life insurance. At first, it felt like trust, but it was control. I let him speak. People like Louis need to empty out before they realize what they're carrying. "She drained my savings in 7 months," he said. "Then one day she was gone. No note, just a courier picking up her things." "Did she ever talk about Daniel?" I asked. His brow furrowed. "She mentioned him once. Said he was an old friend. A fallback." I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. I handed him a copy of Daniel's current will. "She tried to change this. Illegally." Louis's hands trembled as he read. Then he looked up. "You need to stop her." I met his gaze. "Help me do it." He hesitated, then quietly, "What do you need?" "A message," I said. "One she'll recognize. A ghost from the past. He nodded. When I left the cafe, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Sabrina had spent her whole life betting no one would connect the dots. But now, the lines were drawn. And I wasn't the only one holding the pen. The final engagement dinner was set in a glass conservatory glowing with candlelight. Strings played softly in the background. Sabrina had thought of everything from the imported linens to the hand-calligraphed menus. She hadn't thought of me. Or rather, she'd thought of the version I had offered her. Naive, sentimental, easily impressed. She still believed in that woman. And tonight, that woman would raise a glass. I arrived in cream silk and pearls. My lipstick a shade too red. My perfume just a touch too strong. The air around me was warm with celebration. I laughed louder than usual. Spoke with just enough slur to be believable. "She's had a bit too much," Sabrina whispered to her mother, who glanced at me with a mixture of pity and disdain. Perfect. Dinner passed slowly, clinking glasses. Overcooked lamb. Polite laughter echoing off chandeliers. Sabrina performed effortlessly. Daniel beside her, smiling as expected. But I noticed he barely touched his drink. He was listening. Watching. When dessert arrived, I stood. The room fell politely quiet. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, wobbling slightly for effect. "Forgive me, I'm feeling sentimental and, yes, a little drunk." Laughter. Someone clapped softly. I raised my glass. To love, to family, and to a life without secrets. The laughter quieted. Unsure now, I looked at Sabrina. To truth, however, inconvenient, and to new beginnings that don't come at the cost of old ones. A flicker passed across her face, too quick for anyone else to catch, but I caught it. The tightness around her smile, the way her fingers curled slightly around the stem of her glass. Daniel's eyes never left me. I sipped slowly. May we all get exactly what we deserve. There was a silence, brief, breathless. Then someone raised their glass to echo the toast. The noise resumed. Laughter, forks, conversations. But not from her. Sabrina sat frozen for a fraction too long. Glass at her lips, expression unreadable. Then she smiled. But it was the wrong smile. Not the charming, practiced one she wore for the world. This one was rigid, tense. She had heard me, and she knew. The game had changed, and I wasn't playing by her rules anymore. The conservatory glowed like a cathedral of glass and gold. Every surface shimmered under candlelight. A string quartet played softly in the background, a melody so gentle it could have belonged to any happy evening. And yet, beneath that polished calm, I could feel the tension coiled, waiting. It was Sabrina's moment. She'd made sure of it. The photographers were ready. The screen set up for a surprise slideshow. Childhood photos, she'd told Daniel. Something sweet before dessert. I had volunteered to organize the files for her. "You've done so much already," I'd said with a grandmotherly smile. "Let me take care of this one." She had thanked me, kissed my cheek, and handed me the USB drive without a second thought. Now, as the lights dimmed and guests settled, I stood near the projector with a glass of champagne in my hand. My heart beat calmly, steadily. Not from nerves, from timing. The first image flickered to life, a sepia-toned photo of Daniel as a boy, fishing beside his father. The room cooed. Sabrina smiled sweetly, leaning into Daniel's shoulder. The next image faded in. The vineyard, glowing in the Sunday, the engagement shoot. And then, silence. The third image wasn't an image. It was a video. Sabrina entered a dimly lit room, hair loose, expression sharp. A man followed, his voice low, familiar. He's taking them regularly now. The room stilled. Daniel leaned forward, confused. "What is this?" Sabrina's smile faltered. "That's not," the sound continued. "He's foggy already," her voice said from the speakers. "Another week, maybe 2. Gasps spread like wildfire. Glasses stilled midair. The footage continued, grainy but unmistakable. The kiss. The laughter. Her voice again. "After, I'm free. And everything transfers." Someone screamed softly. Sabrina's mother stood up, face drained of color. I watched Sabrina rise from her chair, trembling. "Turn it off," she snapped. "Now." No one moved. The screen froze on her face mid-laugh, radiant, cruel. I set my glass down gently. "Well," I said into the silence. "That wasn't in the rehearsal." Lapped. The lights flickered back on. And just like that, her empire of charm began to crumble. The silence that followed was almost holy. No one spoke. No one even breathed. Then Sabrina's father stood, his chair scraping the marble. "What the hell is this?" Sabrina turned to him, wild-eyed. "It's fake. It's edited. She's lying." She pointed at me, her hand trembling. "She's been trying to ruin me from the start." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The footage had already spoken. Her mother's voice shook. "Sabrina, tell me that's not you." She started, then stopped. Daniel pushed his chair back slowly. "You said you didn't even know that man." "It's not Daniel, please." He held up a hand, trembling. "Stop, don't." The room was spinning now, guests whispering. Servers frozen, her family dissolving in disbelief. The quartet had stopped mid-song. The only sound was the faint hum of the projector cooling. Sabrina's father turned on her. "You've humiliated us," he hissed. "I didn't do anything wrong," she snapped. "You wanted the money just as much as I did." Her mother gasped. "Sabrina!" Daniel's eyes met mine. He didn't need words. Everything he'd refused to believe now stood in front of him, undeniable. He walked out first calmly, quietly, the way people leave funerals. Sabrina called after him, her voice breaking. "Daniel, wait, please!" She lunged toward him, but I stepped in her path. "Move," she hissed. I didn't. No. Her eyes burned. The facade was gone now, every mask stripped away, leaving only fury and fear. "You think you've won?" "I think you've been seen," I said softly. She grabbed the champagne glass nearest to her and threw it. It missed by inches, shattering against the floor. Two guests pulled her back, chairs scraping, voices shouting. "Let her go," I said evenly. "She's just proving the point." Her parents watched in silent horror as security was called, as the whispers turned into murmurs, as the glittering fantasy she'd built collapsed into fragments. When she was finally led away, screaming my name, I turned to the remaining guests. "Apologies," I said gently, smoothing my dress. "It seems we've reached the end of the slideshow." A single laugh, nervous, uncertain, broke the silence. Then, slowly, applause. Not for her, for the truth. The police arrived just after midnight. 2 cars, lights muted, engines humming low against the night air. The estate, once dazzling with music and laughter, now stood silent, a hollow shell of what it had pretended to be. Sabrina's parents were still inside, pale and motionless, seated at the long table beneath the chandeliers that had witnessed every deceit. The guests had fled hours ago. Only whispers and broken glass remained. Daniel stood near the doorway, speaking to one of the officers in a voice I could barely hear. His face was unreadable, drained of anything resembling the boy I'd raised. I wanted to reach out, to comfort him, but this was not a night for comfort, it was for clarity. When the officer turned to me, I was ready. "I believe these will help," I said, handing him the folder I had prepared labeled, dated, methodical. Inside were copies of everything. The forged documents naming Sabrina as financial proxy, the recordings of her and her lover, screenshots of her false ring's provenance, and the medical analysis of the pills she'd been slipping into Daniel's drinks. The officer's brow tightened as he flipped through the evidence. Another approached with the USB drive containing the footage from the projector. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "I installed a camera in one of the restricted rooms," I said plainly. I had reason to be concerned. He studied me for a moment, as though trying to reconcile the image of a calm, silver-haired woman in pearls with the depth of calculation in her words. Then he nodded. "It's enough." When they found Sabrina, she was sitting outside near the fountain, barefoot, mascara streaked, her engagement ring glinting under the garden lights like an accusation. She didn't resist when they cuffed her. She didn't even speak. Only when they led her past me did she look up, eyes hollow, voice hoarse. "You'll regret this," she whispered. I smiled faintly. I already did. The police escorted her through the glass doors, her reflection fractured by the light. As the car pulled away, I exhaled slowly. letting the night fill the silence she left behind. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it signs paperwork in triplicate and drives away under flashing lights. By dawn, the estate was empty. The flowers drooped in their vases. The linen smelled faintly of wine and wilted roses. The candles had burned down to wax puddles. Only the echoes of voices remained, still hanging in the corners, like smoke that refused to leave. I walked the length of the ballroom, heels clicking softly against marble, trailing my fingertips along the tables where laughter had once performed. The sunlight broke through the glass ceiling, spilling gold over the mess. Outside, the fountain still ran a steady rhythm, indifferent to everything that had crumbled around it. Daniel had gone home with one of his friends. He needed space, and I gave it to him. There are wounds that require quiet, not conversation. I paused near the spot where Sabrina had stood the night before, glass in hand, smile like a blade. Her perfume still lingered faintly in the air. Sweet, poisonous, impossible to ignore. I thought of all the times I had played the fool. The gentle widow, the harmless mother, the polite guest in silk gloves. I thought of how easily people see gray hair and assume softness. They never imagine calculation, or courage, or fire. I looked down at the shattered stem of a wineglass near my heel and smiled. They saw an old woman with shaky hands and kind eyes. I whispered to no one. But I've buried a husband, raised a son, and I know exactly what monsters look like in heels. Outside, the sun climbed higher. The day was clean, unspoiled, waiting to begin. I straightened my coat, lifted my chin, and walked through the open doors, leaving the wreckage behind me. There was no triumph in my step, only peace. Because justice, when done right, doesn't need applause. It just needs witnesses.